Gang, gang, gang.
What's your favorite scary movie?
Maybe that should have been left in 2018. Yo, what's up everyone? How you doing? It's your boy Walterdoom, and we're back for another episode of Let's Talk About Horror. And we're at what episode right now? Episode 10? Sounds pretty groovy, man. Groovy. Oh man, imagine if people start bringing that phrase back. Groovy. Oh man, but speaking of groove, we got a couple of things to talk about. So in today's episode, we're going to be talking about the Into the Dark series that's been on Hulu. I'm going to be ranking those episodes. Keep in mind there's going to be spoilers alert in this one. Ton of spoilers, but I'm going to pretty much like grade every Into the Dark series that came out so far. So you're just going to get my ideas. It's just my opinion. I mean, that's all it is. I mean, if you guys agree with it, you agree with it. If you don't, you don't. You know, you guys can make your own ranking system for these series. But before we talk about that, let's talk about something that just came out not too long ago. The Ted Bundy docuseries. Now, that is on Netflix right now, and that is a pretty interesting series that I've watched so far. I mean, I watched all 4 episodes, and it's pretty crazy. I mean, it's already like information that I kind of know about because of the Ted Bundy movie that I saw on Amazon Prime. But some of the information to hear about this, it was pretty eye-opening just to hear like the real life perspective of what was going on. But for those that don't know about it or haven't seen it yet, so this is a docuseries that's made on Netflix. It's Conversations with Ted Bundy, and it's a Joe Bellinger directed series that was made. And Joe Bellinger, he's also responsible for the Ted Bundy movie that's about to come out pretty soon, that is starring Zac Efron. In this docuseries, you hear conversations with journalists like Steve Machado and Hughes Ainsworth, who were there talking with Ted Bundy when he was on death row. We also get like different outputs from like different judges, and one of the survivors, Carol Durange, who actually survived the Bundy case and actually pointed him out in a lineup. Now the thing about this docuseries, it's pretty interesting because you get an insight about like all his cases, basically the early murders that he committed. You hear about like how he escaped and all that, and what he did while he escaped. And it's just interesting to hear. And I'm not saying like interesting, like, oh my God, like, wow, this is interesting. Like, can I try this too? No, it's like interesting to hear like how he got away and kind of like did all the things that he was doing while he was on the run, because none of that stuff will work today. I mean, we're in the age of technology. I mean, imagine like being Ted Bundy during that time, and the technology that we have now actually existed during that time. Like, he wouldn't get away with any of that. And that's the thing that's kind of that I found interesting with this docuseries, because it shows you like the advancements of technology from then compared to today, whereas they didn't have DNA evidence to really like track down a serial killer. They didn't have centralized computers to kind of connect everybody to kind of see like what information is out there. You know, the FBI had to get contact through mail and telephone in order to get kind of information from other departments around different states just to track this guy down. And it was just very interesting to hear about that. Another thing that was like, I wish they kind of spend more time on, but they do kind of highlight the aspects of like his criminal mind and the way he was criminally thinking. Now, if you guys ever watched the docuseries Inside the Criminal Mind, um, and you watch the episode about serial killers, you would get an idea like how he was like really like thinking the way he was thinking. And the thing they kind of didn't really like put too much emphasis on was the way he grew up. And the way he grew up was very traumatizing if you think about it. I mean, he grew up with his mom, really, and she had him at a very young age, I believe. And when she had him and she was taking care of him, I mean, it was just her and her parents taking care of Ted. And the way that they took care of him is that they didn't necessarily like actually claim Ted as her son. She literally called him her brother for a while. Like they literally lied about their relationship, and they lied to Ted about that for very long until you find out that he actually found the birth certificate to see that under the name for mother was her and under the name of father was definitely unknown. So he knew like his mom was not his sister, and he knew that his grandparents, who he called and thought was his parents, he found out those weren't his parents. So imagine just being lied to about stuff like that for a very long time. And that was one aspect that they kind of highlighted inside the Criminal Mind. And they kind of bring about that. Well, they didn't really bring too much information about that in the docuseries about Ted, but it was kind of like brought onto the story a bit. The thing that's also like just very interesting about this dude is, another thing that was interesting that was about this dude is that his wife that he was with before he died, which was Carol Boone. Now, wouldn't it have been interesting to kind of get some feed from her, kind of like a conversation from her or her thoughts in her process about why she was with him? Because I just was like, whoa, after hearing like how he was killing everybody and he's sitting in jail and all that and on death row. I mean, how is she even with this dude? And it's crazy because these dudes actually have a kid together. I mean, she had a child already before him, but they ended up having a child together. And you see in the docuseries that this woman was really bringing the kids to him and visiting him. Now that's crazy. But what was also crazy, and this is how you know these two were too crazy. Well, not crazy. I mean, I hate to use the word crazy, but how mentally unstable these people were. Because she would sneak drugs to him in the jail, and he would take the drugs heavily after he, visits her and goes back to his jail cell. But like I said, I would have been interested in hearing her thoughts. I mean, you hear enough about Ted's thoughts throughout the film, well, throughout the series, but you never quite get a chance to hear her thoughts. Nor do you hear from his longtime girlfriend, Elizabeth Koffler, and I hope I'm saying her name right. But yeah, that would have been another person interesting to hear about. I mean, maybe these people have died or passed on, or maybe they just didn't want to get involved with the docuseries. But it would have been interesting to hear like their thoughts and their opinions about like how they felt about this man, because Kopfer, she dealt with Ted for like a very long time, and he was with her and around her daughter a lot. And the thing she didn't know about like any of his crimes or any of his transgressions that he was doing. I mean, she's been around his apartment and he left things at her place, and she just found those things pretty odd, but she never questioned it. She never really questioned it fully, And to hear about the news about him and probably seeing like a picture of him, or a sketch of him, yeah, she probably was like really alerted after that. Oh man. But I'm just saying, it would have been interesting to hear some of those thoughts. The technology also, like I said, that was very interesting. I mean, can you imagine a time where Like, we don't have the amount of technology or security that we have today to kind of protect us. And I should say protect us in quotation marks sometimes, because sometimes that's even been abused. I mean, thanks to Eric Snowden. But it's funny how, like, back then, the amount of, like, security, and it kind of shows you how much, like, people were trusting back then. I just felt like people were more trusting back in those times. I mean, even though some people wouldn't get trusted if you were a minority, because believe me, if you were a minority, you weren't trusted. Oh man, and that's definitely for real for, like, dealing with, like, the Zodiac killer. I mean, can you believe, like, at first people was saying, like, the Zodiac killer is African American? That's crazy. But turns out he wasn't even African American at all. He was Caucasian. But yeah, just imagine being in those times where, like, there wasn't much, like, cameras running around. There's no camera phones. There's no cell phones, period, to be honest. There's no computers, no internet, no nothing. So information was very slow back in those times. And that's really what changed the amount of, like, how people dealt with security and just, like, how they went about protecting, Americans and all that. But it was just an interesting thing to see, like, how this dude managed to kind of outsmart the law. Wow. But yeah, kind of outsmart the law, go on a run not only once but twice, which is crazy. Like, how does somebody do that? But yeah, pretty much go on the run twice. And on the second time he was on the run, I mean, he was really strategic about this one. I mean, you see, in the second time he was on the run, he really was, like, on the run. Where the first time he was on the run, he was just not too far from any area where police could get him. That's why they got him in, like, a couple of days. Second time, it took them a while because this dude literally got out, caught a train, caught a bus. And to be honest, it's like, for someone who was very infamous, per se, how does no one recognize this dude? I mean, that's another thing. I was kind of wondering that, like, how does no one recognize this dude walking through the open? I mean, he's on the news. He's pretty much in the papers. I mean, it made me wonder, like, how ignorant was people back then to where this dude he even went to a football game. Well, he went to a bar where his his school's football team was playing. And apparently got beat up at the bar. And it's like, how does no one recognize this dude from the news? Like, how uninformed are people really? But yeah, definitely you guys should check that out. It's definitely an interesting watch. You could really get through it in one day if you're, like, a super binge watcher. I mean, we all should be super binge watchers if you guys are listening to this podcast. But yeah, definitely it was interesting getting through it. But yeah, definitely check it out. It's on Netflix. But anyway, let's move on to what we're going to talk about today.
What's your favorite scary movie?
Alright guys, so as you know, Hulu got a series called Into the Dark series, and it's a Blumhouse produced project. And for each month, they coming out with, like, a horror story dealing with each holiday of the month, and each one has a twist to it. So, like, November is Thanksgiving. They have a story for Thanksgiving. They have one for Halloween when it first started, and they're coming out with one that's coming out for Valentine's Day. So what I'm gonna do is pretty much I'm gonna talk about each one, and I'm gonna rank each one appropriately as how I see fit. The ranking that I'm doing it, I'm going by, like, a grading scale, which is my own grading scale, that I'm just, like, kind of things that stuck out to me, which made me kind of want to grade the movies by how I wanted to grade them. So I'm grading each one by like acting, storyline, contrast, lighting, gore, and body count. And they're all going to be ranked out of like the best of 5. And what I do is kind of like do a grade overall for each film. And I'm going to be going from each movie that has came out in chronological order, and I'm going to place them rankingly where they fit. So basically, like, say like we got like Halloween, Thanksgiving, and Christmas. Say like Thanksgiving has the highest one. Well, Halloween comes out first, so that one is placed first. But then I find the Thanksgiving story a little bit better, so that one gets placed over the Halloween story. And when the Christmas story comes out, wherever that fits, I'm gonna place it where I see fit. So maybe that one comes out and it's a little bit better than the Halloween one that came out, so that one is being placed second. All right, so now that we got that, just to tell you guys, this is not a professional ranking. This is just my thoughts about how I'm ranking them. Because, hey, if you guys have like a ranking system, I kind of want to talk about like which one was better, which one was worse, and kind of like give my thoughts about like which one maybe you guys want to check out most. You get me? So the first one in the Into the Dark series was The Body. So before I start talking about this, a couple of things I'm going to focus on when I'm talking about the movies. I'm going to focus on the premise. I'm going to talk about what's good about the movie. And after that, we're going to talk about like where they all rank as far as like individual, like, well, basically as a whole. Also, as far as like the rankings, like the subjects that I'm using for ranking, I mean, acting and storyline, I mean, that's pretty obvious. Contrast and lighting, since lighting seems to play a big factor in most of these movies, I feel like contrast and lighting kind of like plays a role somewhat to where like we could talk about it and how much effect that it gives you as far as like emotionally, and as much as like, you know, as an aspect as like how it fits in the films. And also with gore and body count, I know some of these films don't have too much body counts per se, but definitely we're going to talk about like how gore kind of plays a factor in it, and how like the gore, maybe something like horrifying, like, I don't know, some blood spews, maybe like you get blood splatters everywhere. It kind of plays a factor. I mean, it doesn't have to be necessarily like bodies dropping everywhere, you know. And how unprofessional of me, like everything is just going off. But anyway, let's go ahead and talk about the first film. So the first film of the month that came out for the Into the Dark series was The Body. Now, The Body is the Halloween film that came out that stars with Tom Bateman as this character named Wilkes, who's a hitman who has to transport a body in 4 hours at a drop-off site for this guy that owns the dark web. But during this journey, he encounters 3 characters, Dorothy, Alan, and Jack, who is played by Aurora Perrineau, who is actually the daughter of the guy who actually was on the show Lost, if anybody watched that show. I found that out from Instagram like not too long ago. David Hull and Ray Santiago. And with these characters, they pretty much give him an obstacle of trying to keep him from transporting this body by stealing this body and trying to destroy the body themselves. With the help of Maggie, who is played by Rebecca Rittenhouse, she helps Wilkes actually track the friends down and trying to track down the body so that he could stay on task to actually get his job completed. All right, a couple of things I wanted to highlight is basically the story. The story was probably like the strongest point of this movie. I mean, the acting was definitely okay. I mean, I wasn't really too intrigued with the acting too much. I mean, and that's probably mainly because like some of the emotions that you get from some of the characters like Wilkes, you know, he has this kind of robotic personality sometimes, and it just comes off as a little like too robotic for me. I mean, I feel like he didn't convey enough emotions. David Hull's character as Alan, that was also kind of like another factor that was kind of annoying to me. I was just like, why does he talks like that? But I mean, other than those characters, I mean, the strongest point really was in the storyline. And the storyline is probably what sold the movie the most to me. And that's because of like the whole underlining tale of a life of two sides. There's a surface world and there's an underworld. And that's basically what this movie was really about, which was definitely a good highlight to the storyline. You get like the idea of like how Wilkes, he is like a character of the underworld where they lack like any sort of consequence, sort of like they actually they don't have any order. They take their order by their own hands. They pretty much like do whatever they want. Whereas the characters of the surface world, which is Alan, Dorothy, and Jack, you know, they're living like in the surface world views, you know, they surface world beliefs, as in like religion, like believing that there's a God, believing in God, I should say, or just things like, you know, going to school, going to working for a job, having goals and ambitions, and actually believing in like their art. You know, Jack, he wants to be a filmmaker, and he believes in the art of filmmaking as like being something to be celebrated in the world. Whereas Wilkes, he doesn't believe in all that. Like, he takes like the belief of art and longevity as a sense of like just empty accomplishments. Like it means nothing to anybody, and that anybody that, you know, he's trying to impress, they wouldn't even care about him if he even existed at all. Another thing that kind of highlights like this whole idea of surface world and underworld beliefs is the body also. Now, we don't know who is the body specifically, but we get the idea that it's somebody famous and popular, like a huge celebrity or what have you. And the thing is, like, when Alan, Jack, and Dorothy, the crew, just sees like the body, they're amazed and they're awed and they're like enamored by who it is. Whereas Wilkes, he just sees it as another job and just another person to kill. And that's pretty much it. It does like play a good conflict. I mean, it's not a strong conflict, but it does play a good conflict because you get to see kind of like the ideas and how the characters think as far as like certain situations. Whereas like Maggie, who is part of the surface world, but is gradually trying to cling to the dark world. Oh my God, I can't even talk here. But you see Maggie trying to cling to the dark world as soon as she gets like really in contact with like Wilkes. Like, she's enamored by his world and wants to be a part of it. And you see like she takes like all the skills that she learns from her surface world job and applies it to her underworld lifestyle as far as like hacking computers and Jack's cell phone. Whereas you see like the characters, the crew, which I'm going to call them right now for the rest of the time being, you see the crew of Jack and the gang, and when they are trying to destroy the body, you know, you get Alan, who's ridiculously looking up how to destroy a body on Wikipedia. Very laughable indeed, but that one, and you also get he also got the idea to destroy the body and how to destroy the body from Breaking Bad. When you hear about that, which you hear Dorothy reply to him like, "This is why you're single." Oh man. All right, as far as rankings go for the whole thing, I gave the acting a 3 out of 5 because, like I said, the acting wasn't that strong. The storyline got a 4 out of 5. It was a good storyline. I mean, it wasn't a strong storyline, but it was definitely good as far as like what they were presenting. Contrast and lighting was a 4 out of 5 also. And gore got a 5 out of 5 because, man, people was getting killed. Gore and body count, and I gotta say, it was mainly for the body counts in this movie that got me going like, yeah, you know what? This one got a 5 out of 5 because the way Wilkes kind of killed everyone, it was definitely at the most merciless way possible. I mean, between like him taking out Jack's eye, just like how in Terrifier, like Art the Clown was trying to take out that one chick's eye. I can't remember her name right now. But yeah, that was pretty gruesome. And the way he just like killed Alan, and he pretty much stabbed Maggie in the back. I mean, oh my god, dude. Just to see him stab her in the back, it was crazy. But yeah, that definitely gave it a 5 out of 5. Overall, the grade for this movie got a 4 out of 5 overall, and that kind of places it at first by default, just because it's the first film that's on the list. All right, so now we're gonna move on to Flesh and Blood.
Red rum. Red rum. Red rum. Red rum. Red rum.
All right, so Flesh and Blood stars Dermot Mullaney, who stars as Henry Toombs, and Diane Silvers as Kimberly Toombs. And what happens is that Kimberly is dealing with agoraphobic after her mother is found murdered, and Kimberly is basically afraid to go outside. She starts to suspect her father of murder, or even like being part of this missing girl's death, because she receives a necklace that looks strangely familiar, or strangely resembles the same necklace that the girl is wearing in the missing picture. I don't know where to start with this one. Oh man, I mean, I would have to say the strongest thing probably for this movie, the strongest part of this movie was probably storyline also. But it wasn't a great storyline. And the reason why I said the storyline is probably strongest, well, it goes back to what I was talking about earlier about Inside with the Criminal Mind. So like I mentioned before about like Inside the Criminal Mind, if you guys watched the serial killer episode, you know that the serial killers, they usually have ways of deceiving others from knowing that they are a killer, or that they're gonna kill them. And this movie kind of highlights some of those aspects or ideologies into this film. You know, they highlight the aspects of the deceiving, the manipulation, not only the trophies also, but also the countless victims who actually all look alike. And this is what you get also in this movie. Now, the thing about this storyline, though, is that it could have went so many ways, to be honest. I mean, because first time when I was watching it, I mean, I gotta admit, I was probably deceived also, because I was taking everything as face value, and I just saw that Kimberly, who was just agoraphobic, you know, I just took her as delusional most of the time, because, you know, she had nothing else better to do. She was always stuck in the house all the time. But after watching the movie twice, I mean, now I realize, yeah, you know, he was the killer, and that it easily could have been just like the end of the movie if we just took like what we saw when she went in her dad's room to discover that he had a photo album dealing like his victims, and just like pretty much a photo album of like all the deaths that he did. And when she also discovered his trophy case of jewelry that he stole from women that he has probably most likely murdered. Yeah, there's not much I can really say about this movie that really isn't like too strong or too overwhelming. Well, not really overwhelming, but could really go any further of details, because the story is pretty much a simple story. I mean, it does play on the fact of like, what would you do if you found out like your family member was a murderer or I can't even say that right. What if your parent was a serial killer? You know, what if your caretaker was a serial killer? And that's really what this movie is like, playing on the hints of. And it plays on that tactic. I mean, and it is kind of conflicting, because you see the conflict between Kimberly and herself, just trying to fight the fact like, hey, maybe my dad isn't this. And, she tries to give him the benefit of the doubt, but yet she still kept fighting and fighting because the evidence was too strong. And especially it was too strong after he committed the murder right in front of her when he ended up killing her doctor in front of her. Man. But like I said, it could have played different ways. I mean, I felt like they could have played it more on the delusional side where we just thought she was being more delusional than anything because honestly, I mean, I felt like that's what she was. I mean, I couldn't believe anything she was saying. I thought she was being irrational. But they could have played it on more of that than anything. And still probably would have gotten the same results, maybe. I don't know. It would have been a different film. I just felt like they could have played it differently with that. But, I mean, as far as, like, ranking it, I mean, the acting, I gave it a 2 out of 5. I wasn't really into the acting too much because I just felt like some of the characters lacked the range of acting, especially for Henry's character. I mean, most of the time you just seen him with, like, 2 emotions and maybe just one mainly. Even when he was angry, it just seemed like he was still conveying one emotion. You didn't really get much, like, anger out of him. He was just, like, very soft-spoken and just, like, trying to smooth everything over, really. Especially with Kimberly also. You get, like, maybe 2 emotions out of her, and it wasn't enough that really convinced me too much about her character. I was just like, okay. But yeah, it definitely was a 2 out of 5 for me. As far as storyline, like I said, it kind of fooled me at first. I mean, I didn't really see him as the killer. But like I said, they could have went about it in like 2 different ways, like I said. But this one got a 3 out of 5 for me. And so did contrast and lighting. I just felt like some of the lighting in this movie that they tried to like really highlight, like some of the reds, which I know is that there's a lot of reds that play a lot in the Into the Dark series movies. But in this movie, they really try to put some reds a lot in like different areas, like in the dad's room. They try to make it seem like, they try to give you that hint like, hey, the dad is the killer. This is the red lighting for this room. That one I could get, okay, but I didn't get why like they need the red light in the basement. Well, not the basement, but in the attic. And that didn't make any sense to me, like when she turned on the light in the attic and all that red lighting happened, and it kind of highlighted that little trophy box that he had. Yeah, I just felt like it was unnecessary and like they didn't really need that. But yeah, that definitely got a 3 out of 5 for me. And so did the gore and body count. The body count got a 1 out of 5 because aside from seeing the doctor getting killed, which was really kind of like an off-screen kill, I didn't like the fact that we were treated to... Oh. That's going to be funny to hear. Yeah, I didn't like how we were treated to, like, hearing about, like, all his victims. And, we didn't really see any body count or really any much gore from the movie. It just felt like, I don't know, like Seventh Heaven mixed with a slasher film. But yeah, overall, the grade for this movie got a 2 out of 5, which brings it under the Body series, which makes it by default second at the moment. So yeah, right now I'm gonna take a break, you guys. If I stop dropping my mic a lot. But yeah, I'm going to take a break, you guys. And when I come back, we're going to talk about the rest of the Into the Dark series, as in Puka. And the last one, New Year, New You. All right?
Here's Johnny.
All right, guys. We are back. And we are here now to talk about our favorite Pokemon reject, the Puka. Or at least our Furby reject. I mean, that's pretty much what the Puka is. In this movie, we learn about an actor named Wilson. He moves into a new city that's pretty ominous, well, a new city and apartment, and or I don't think he lived in a different town or whatever. But he moves into this new ominous apartment and he gets a job as a mascot for America's favorite toy. While being this favorite toy, he actually goes down a path of delusions and series of tragic events, or horrific events, I should say. Puka is starring Nasha Hatindi. I'm definitely butchering his name as the main character Wilson. We also got Latarsha Rose as Melanie, Dale Dickey as Red, and Johnny Berryman as Ty. The one thing I could really say about this film that I think is pretty much the strongest out of all the other films, it has two things going for it. But the main thing that's the strongest thing that kind of pulls this movie along and kind of makes this movie what it is definitely the lighting and contrast. And the one thing I got to say about the lighting and contrast is that it's used in a sense of mood and tension. And what I mean by that is that it conveys very like an emotion each time. So we know in the movie Puka, when Wilson auditions to be the Puka and he gets the role as the mascot, he dons the suit of the character, and the character, whenever he is the character, depending on his moods or whatever, he could either be a good Puka or a naughty Puka, which is in the blue and red lights, which are its representations. And when we see like it being in blue, we know the blues mean like it's good and the reds are in bad. So we get like an idea of where his mood and I guess his mood and tensions are. And I gotta tell you, the first time when I was watching this film, that was the first thing I noticed about this movie, and that's what really kind of drew me in at first. I wasn't really into like the storyline or the dialogue or anything like that. I really thought the storyline was pretty whack. Not whack, but I thought the storyline was not really that great. It was kind of mediocre to me at first. But then I had to take the consideration that the second time when I was watching it, I actually watched it a little bit differently. And the reason why I say I watched it a little bit differently, because at first, I took it as like a face value kind of thing. But then I had to realize, like, maybe the story is not taking place in a real life time, but actually in purgatory, in hell maybe. And what Wilson is going through is just a repeat of the hell that he was going through when he was in the living world. And that kind of plays on like my idea of what this movie is about, because in this movie we see a sprinkle of like characters that are being used everywhere else in the film. So say like in the beginning of the film, we see Wilson take a picture of this guy and his family. Later on, we see that same guy. Wilson doesn't recognize him, or the guy doesn't recognize Wilson, but the guy ends up taking a picture of Wilson and his family, which is complete irony. And then also in the film, we got the guy who shows up at the news casting about the Pukas being taken back or recalled, and he pretty much is like really outspoken about his opinion about the Pukas. And then we see the same guy later on kicking Wilson's ass. So I mean, if you guys really pay attention, like, here's another thing. The guy Finn, the guy who actually gives Wilson a job, we see him again appearing as one of the people who work for the ambulance when Wilson has his car crash and everything. And this is Wilson kind of cycling back to like the horrific night that he feels guilty about, which is what he was trying to get away from, which is why his soul was at unrest, because he has not accepted the fact that he pretty much murdered 4 people and himself. Yeah, so I mean, I really think that's what this movie is about. It's about purgatory, as well as like, well, yeah, just it's about purgatory mainly. I don't know where else I was going with that, but oh, I know where I was going. Yeah, but as well as like the movie guiding us with the red and blue lightings about tension and just basically desires and what have you, and just all about like the sense of how much a dream or how much fame could really corrupt us, really, because that's what it really was about when he was doing all the horrific things that he was doing. He was getting too much fame and letting it go to his head. I seen a YouTube video about like talking about Puka and kind of explaining what the Puka movie was about. And the thing they explained was like it's kind of like a new version of the Christmas Story, which kind of makes sense because it did come around Christmas time. It is a Christmas movie. But I literally just don't see it at all, like dealing with like Christmas ghost and whatever. I mean, I kind of get that Puka could kind of be a Christmas ghost in a way, but I didn't really see Puka as like Christmas past, Christmas present, and Christmas future at all. I really didn't see him as that. I mean, maybe he is in the different integrations that we see him when he becomes like, you know, slightly Puka, all fresh and new looking, to, you know, very burnt up and damaged Puka at the end, which is like the future, which is supposed to be like Wilson's future in a way. But at the same time, I never really saw it as like dealing with the Christmas ghost or whatever, because we don't really see Wilson actually dealing with a new world or a new present. You know, we just see him cycling back, which has very good symmetry, by the way, of hearing the Puka who repeats what Melanie says, look at all the pretty lights. And honestly, to me, it just tells me like he is in purgatory or in hell, and he's just cycling back and forth through all the mistakes that he did while he was living. And not only that, I mean, he's also going through hellacious situations where he has to see the incident or the car accident hit him every single moment and every time. Like when he's in the house and he sees like the two little mannequins and they have oil coming out of them, or when he goes into the house that he wants to move into or did live in and he sees like the Christmas tree smashed through the window that he pretty much damaged when he was like with Melanie. And he sees like the car oil leaking out of the Christmas tree. I mean, that's just my idea. I mean, maybe I'm wrong on that, but I mean, it's definitely, to me, it sounds like it was all about being in purgatory. The things that I had to give it a grade on, as far as like acting, I did give acting a 4 out of 5. I thought the acting was pretty good. I mean, the characters have tremendous range and believability. There were some parts that were kind of not really the greatest acting, like Wilson trying to cry. That no one should never make a face like that, by the way. If they're trying to fake cry or trying to act like they're crying, I should never see a face like that. I mean, after seeing his face like trying to make tears or whatever, it actually was very funny to me actually seeing that. Red's character, sometimes I just felt like her role, I don't know if that's her real accent or not, but I just felt like it was a little too overbearing. Sometimes it couldn't sound like you couldn't really understand her lines fully or whatever. But yeah, acting was definitely good. It helped me kind of believe the story a little bit, which is like a 4 out of 5. Storyline, I gave a 4 out of 5 also. I thought the story was pretty good. Like I said, it could have been a 5 out of 5 if we were clear about where Wilson was at. And I get Puka is kind of leaving you in that unpredictable state because the story is all about unpredictability, and the mascot itself is pretty unpredictable also. But yeah, I get that it leaves you like basically in an unpredictable state, and that you got to figure out whether, it's up to you to figure out whether he's in purgatory or not, or whether he's in the living realm or not. So for that, I gave it a 4 out of 5 because I just felt like it was just too much, like, open ended, and it just wasn't clear and precise. I mean, it's good that they want to be mysterious about it, but I mean, at the same time, let us fucking know. I mean, no one wants to figure this shit out. But for contrast and lighting, like, that's clearly a 5 out of 5. I mean, it was definitely a good sense of lighting and contrast, and it was definitely what brought the mood to the story. I mean, it definitely gave you a certain mood each time you see the lighting, especially when Wilson was pretty much masturbating in the dark. You get like these wonderful blue lighting with red sprinkles about, and we kind of get the idea that it's just all about sex, sex in that scene. So yeah, for that was a really good sense of lighting that they used in this whole movie, which is why it got a 5 out of 5. For gore and body count, now here's where it becomes kind of difficult, and some of you might not agree with me on this one, but I gave this one a 3 out of 5, and I know you guys are thinking like, damn, this one got a 3 out of 5, but you gave Flesh and Blood a 1 out of 5 for body count. This one, there wasn't even no real body count. Well, technically there was, and honestly speaking, there was some body counts, which was good enough for me to see. I mean, I could have gave it a 2, but I gave it a 3 more specifically because of the horror aspects and the gore. And the gore was basically like all the delusional incidents that was happening with Puka, or I should say Wilson as the Puka, between him seeing like the Christmas tree and the horrifying aspects of it, like bleeding out the oil, the mannequins bleeding out the oil, laying down as 2 dead bodies. Seeing Dale Dickey's character falling out the window, even though we don't really see her falling out the window, and we get the idea that when she falls out the window, she's actually grabbing grips of how she died also, which is another thing to kind of like bring in attention. Like, her character also was in that same purgatory as Wilson, and when she finally learns about how she dies and kind of accepts her own death and accepts the fact that she killed her daughter also, possibly from drunk driving, because we do see her drinking a lot in the movie, her soul finally passes on. This is why I have to say with this one, yeah, it wasn't too much of a body count in this one, but we do see a lot of horrific things and a lot of, horrific aspects and kind of like gore, especially when Wilson is fighting the Puka, who actually bleeds out oil on him to kind of remind him, like, look what you did. But yeah, 3 out of 5. That's the best I could give it, which brings the total grade of this movie of 4 out of 5. Now, in my opinion, this has to be probably the best movie on the whole Into the Dark series, because of how many layers that comes into this movie, or how many layers this movie has, I should say. And I mean, yeah, it may not have as many body counts as The Body. They're both tied for first and second, I should say, as 2 of the best movies that's on the Into the Dark, well, that's on Hulu right now, that come from the Into the Dark series. And that brings Flesh and Blood down to like a number 3 spot. Alright, so now we're going to talk about New Year and New You. Alright guys, so now we're here for the last film that we got to talk about, New Year, New You. And this movie is about 4 high school friends who get together for New Year's Eve to kind of reminisce and catch up with each other. But during this event, a kind of change happens, where one friend is kind of envious of the other and wants her to kind of confess to a murder that happened during their high school years. In this film, it stars Suki Waterhouse as Alexis, Carly Chankin, who plays Danielle. And here's something I didn't know, fun fact, or kind of like a random tidbit. I didn't realize this was the same chick that was on Suburgatory who played the, I don't want to say airhead daughter, but she was kind of like an airhead. But yeah, I remember I used to watch that show when I was younger. And I always used to watch it just because like Jane Levy or Ally Grant was on there. And that was the only reason why. But yeah, when I realized it was her, I was like, oh shit, that's home chick. Oh man. But also starring on this is Kirby Howell. Let me. Oh my god, I'm getting like so tongue tied. Kirby Howell Baptiste as Kayla and Melissa Berglund as Chloe. The one thing I gotta say about this movie that is really good is really just the acting. Surprisingly. I mean, some people might not like the acting in this movie, but the acting was probably like the most superb thing in this movie than anything else. Because in the movie, it kind of pulls you in two different directions with the acting. In this movie, we have Alexis, who pretty much has like been unlucky after her high school years. After she was dealing with the death of their old friend Kelsey, who she feels was Danielle's responsibility or the cause of Kelsey's death. Basically, she feels Danielle was the one who caused Kelsey to commit suicide because they always bullied her. And ever since then, Alexis has been living in this past that she couldn't let go of because she felt guilty. This movie really, the storyline kind of focuses more on letting go of the past, by the way, which is something that I noticed. I mean, it kind of like, new year, new you. And I guess it does play on the fact, like, with New Year's Eve, we always try and make these goals of changing ourselves, And in this story, we kind of see Alexis, who has been kind of held back from being successful or trying to accomplish any goals because she hasn't let go of the past yet. And the acting by her is definitely really good because at first we get this idea that Alexis is the one trying to kill Danielle. I mean, at first we knew there was something going on with her. I mean, we didn't really knew what it was at first, but as we progress along the movie and the clock strikes 12, we finally see that Alexis is trying to torture Danielle and trying to get her confess. But here's something that was like a flip script a little bit. We didn't know like Danielle was going to go all out trying to protect her reputation and try to kill everyone. I mean, that was like a real flip script right there. And the thing about that, I mean, it kind of plays on the fact that with Danielle, we kind of figure out that she's a sociopath. And that's what I figured out on the second watch. I mean, I didn't really think about it on the first watch because first watch, I mean, I'm not really analyzing the movie. I'm just trying to enjoy myself and watch it. And, after I'm done watching it, if I want to like get a deeper look, I'll look for a deeper look in the movie. But in this one, on my second watch, I noticed that she was more of a sociopath. And I'm just thinking to myself, like, man, how did I miss this? Another thing that you would notice in this movie is the use of mirrors and reflection, and it goes back to what I was talking about, like the basic premise or the overall of the story is trying to change yourself and trying to reflect, like basically reflecting on past and present and maybe future. And you see a lot of the mirrors being used in the movie as a source of kind of like reflection. And you would kind of see like how sometimes in the movie you kind of get this dark, ominous look in the mirror by both characters of Alexis and Danielle, especially Danielle when they were dancing to TLC's Pretty. I almost forgot what song it was for a second. Oh man. But yeah, basically, I mean, you get a lot of like reflections being used, basically mirrors. And I mean, if you guys didn't catch it before, I mean, watch it again if you watched it already before. You know, watch it again and actually look at how they're using the mirrors in the movie as a sort of like reflection of the person that they are. And we kind of see what the characters are definitely thinking or what they're up to. And we kind of do see before Danielle really starts going on her serial killer rampage, which technically she didn't, but she definitely was kind of like a Charles Manson type person, if you think about it. Because once when she got tied up and got free, she pretty much manipulated Chloe to kind of take the fall for everything. Hence why I say she's a sociopath. I mean, come on, it's like Danielle did not want to get her hands dirty. If she was going to get her hands dirty, she was going to get her hands dirty from trying to kill Alexis. But even if she didn't want to get her hands dirty by killing Alexis, she was going to try and get Chloe's hands dirty by killing Alexis. And the way she was going to do that was just basically feeding Chloe some bullshit about, oh, you're going to be my takeover host once I start my own show. Like, she really dabbled that little like trinket in her face and just made it seem like, hey, Chloe, you know, I'm here for you, even though I made fun of you being like a fat bitch and all that. But yeah, you do get like to see like this chick was really like a sociopath and crazy. She'll do whatever it is to kind of protect herself just because of her money. To kind of like talk about the gradings that I give. Like I said, with acting, that's a 4 out of 5. That's a surefire winner for me because it definitely pulled me in it definitely pulled me. I know, it's like, what's going on? It pulled me in 2 different directions as far as like where this movie was going or where these characters were going with themselves. Storyline definitely had a 3 out of 5. I mean, it wasn't the best. It was okay, but it was definitely good in a way. I mean, it held my attention as much as it could. I mean, maybe because it's just a bunch of women running around in their night pajamas or whatever. I mean, hey, who doesn't like seeing girls run around half naked in a movie? I mean, it's a horror movie. Isn't that what some of us dudes watch it for? It's like in the movie, it's this movie I watched not too long ago on Tubi called Don't Fuck in the Woods. And I know it's like kind of like a random tangent in a way, but in this movie, there's these guys, well, let me talk about the premise first. Basically, the premise is you can't fuck in the woods, otherwise you get killed by this beast for some reason. I don't know where this beast comes from. I don't even know why he even exists, but yeah, he kills people just because they fuck in the woods, which is such a hilarious premise, by the way. But there's these dudes that work in a video store, right? I don't remember the characters' names because I only watched it once. And I was pretty drunk when I was watching it, by the way. It was one of those movies where you just like, let me watch something while I'm chilling out and let me kind of like, you know, watch something that I don't have to pay too much attention to, but I can follow the story just how it is. Basically, The one thing that stuck out to me from this movie was about like these dudes and this chick that worked at a video store, and they were talking about horror movies and how good they were. And the one thing that they brought up in this conversation about horror movies is that tits sell in a horror movie. It's all about tits and gore. I remember mainly they said tits, and that's about it. I don't remember them saying gore, but they definitely said tits sell for like horror movies. And I couldn't help but just sit there and be like, damn, sometimes you kind of do want to see tits in a horror movie. See some big tit chick walking around and then she gets stabbed up by this crazy serial killer in the most horrific fashion for some reason. I mean, it makes up for like perfect entertainment in a way. Because it's just so ridiculous. And especially this movie, it was definitely full of like that and ridiculousness. Oh man, but I mean, for me, I don't think totally like tits sell for like most horror movies. I mean, it does have to have a good storyline for me. Unless I'm drunk, that's the only time. I'll just sit there and be like, all right, I'll watch this horror movie. I mean, it got tits running around. I mean, hey, I don't need to pay attention. I just see tits. Oh man. So for those that are still here with me, oh man, we're gonna continue. Storyline was, yeah, like I said, 3 out of 5. Contrast and lighting, it was a 3 out of 5. Also, I just felt like sometimes they did use some unnecessary lighting in this movie that was like, that didn't really do anything for the movie at all. I mean, I could have went a 2 with it, but I mean, it was still kind of like a mediocre lighting situation. I mean, it wasn't terrible or anything like that, but I do feel like sometimes when they tried to like bring in some of the reds, which I kind of mentioned earlier, they do have like a lot of red lighting or red coloring in these films to kind of highlight some type of rage or scary emotion or whatever. And in this movie, I mean, you get to see like not really red lighting, but just red coloring sprinkled out through the film. And I just felt like the coloring was not really necessary. It didn't really do anything for the scene. It didn't really like assist the scene in any type of situation. And it didn't really give me a sense of like any type of emotion felt for it. So yeah, I mean, that one had a 3 out of 5. Gore and body count, and you guys probably might not agree with me because this one did have a significant body count in it, but I feel like what really threw the body count off was just the gore effect. And the gore effect was, some of these killings was just not that great, to be honest. I mean, just to see Kayla get killed by being pushed by Chloe onto the counter, well, yeah, bathroom sink counter, or the corner of the sink counter, which pretty much killed her after that. That was just a terrible way to die. That was like, why did that happen? In a way. Or even with like Kayla's girlfriend, Frankie, when she got stabbed up by Chloe, and you really don't see the stabbing too much, but it is kind of like a horrible effect to just see her just get stabbed so like mercilessly, but kind of like not really in the most, I guess, dramatic fashion. I mean, I was expecting probably more out of it, but hey, I mean, that's one random character that gets killed in the movie. I would say probably the only awesome killing to see in this movie is the way Chloe goes down by Alexis when she takes like a golf club and tries to hit Danielle with it, but Danielle moves Chloe in the way, and then Chloe takes the hit and she falls down the stairs and she's pretty much dead after that. Which is kind of lame, but probably like the best one that had the best death yet in dramatic fashion. But in all, the overall grade for this movie that I gave this is pretty much a 3 out of 5. which would make this movie the third overall movie out of the series, which brings, well, sadly enough, Flesh and Blood to last place, which I hate to say, like, Flesh and Blood was definitely the worst one yet in the series. My prediction for this next one that's supposed to come out, which is Down, I don't really know what this one is going to be about. The only thing I know about this movie is that it's supposed to deal with Valentine's Day. It's supposed to be the Valentine's weekend of this year. And in this Valentine's Day weekend, President Day is also coming up on that Monday. All right, so in the movie Down, it's about this man and a woman that are stuck in an elevator. And while they're stuck in this elevator, they start building this bond together. And while they're building this bond, I guess they find out something insidious about one another or something like that. I don't know what this shit is going to take it. The only thing I could think about possibly is for the simple fact that each movie is dealing with some type of serial killer or someone is dealing with some type of death around them. It's only fair to say, like, the trend of these past movies is only going to catch up to this one also. And I think this one is probably going to deal with the guy being a stalker, because that's the only thing I can really see happening as far as like a logical creep factor for like one of the characters, is that this man turns out to be a stalker, and he probably planned on being stuck in this elevator the whole time with this woman. Or he could possibly trying to move up in a position that she's taken from him, or she's some kind of higher up than him, and he wants to knock her off by killing her in this elevator. And he probably planned on getting this elevator stuck. He probably planned on doing this whole time, knowing that the President Day weekend is coming up on Monday also. Nobody won't be back till Tuesday. My only problem with this idea of this movie is two things. One, I mean, you could only do so much being stuck in an elevator as far as a movie goes. And, you know, who knows what kind of suspense or kind of tension that we'll get from these people being stuck in this elevator. I mean, I kind of think like it's kind of like a lame idea, kind of like Devil. I don't know if any of you guys seen Devil before. I haven't seen Devil before, and I was never interested in seeing Devil because of the lame premise of people being stuck in an elevator. And they're being stuck by this killer creature, monster, or whatever the fuck this dude was that was killing them in an elevator. Yeah, that wasn't like a cool thing to hear. Two, for the simple fact that this movie is supposed to be based around this year's Valentine's Day weekend and President's Day weekend, which kind of collides on the same, well, days apart from each other, I should say. The thing is, what's off about this is that Valentine's Day is actually on a Thursday. So how is it that like nobody is there on Friday? Because Valentine's Day is not a real holiday, by the way. I mean, people treat it as if it's a holiday, but it's not a real holiday. I mean, Valentine's Day really doesn't mean shit, really. I mean, all it is just is a fake holiday for people to spend money and fake show that they love somebody all the time. I mean, that's about it. But I ain't knocking anybody who really like, you know, loves Valentine's Day or any type of way. But I mean, that's just my opinion. I mean, I'm not a fan of it because I always thought it was like a fake ass holiday. I mean, come on now. You got 365 days to show somebody you love them. You don't need a fucking one day to just tell somebody like, hey, I love you or anything like that. I always thought the concept of Valentine's Day was lame anyway. But yeah, moving on. That was my tangent about that. But yeah, how is it that they're stuck the whole weekend till President's Day? Valentine's Day is on a Thursday, which means they have Friday. And I kind of get some businesses are closed on Saturday, but I feel like the building that they're in, it wouldn't be closed on a Saturday. I feel like it would be open. You know, I feel like the only day that the building that they work in will be closed, it'll be closed on a Sunday. So how the hell is like those two stuck in an elevator for like, let's see, for like damn near 5 days. Like, that makes no sense to me. I mean, you're already throwing me off on what this story is about. Maybe I'm overthinking the story a bit. I mean, I do that sometimes, but hey, I mean, that's a couple of things I noticed about this film. I mean, I'm going to check it out once it comes out. It comes out February 1st, so we'll see what happens when I talk about where this movie ranks as far as like everything else. Hell, maybe this movie might actually take the last spot over Flesh and Blood, because right now I'm already not really interested in watching Down. Oh man. But yeah, this is my rankings and prediction, which we kind of got a bit, which I didn't plan on doing really. But yeah, now that we talked about like everything from the Into the Dark series, let's go ahead and close out the show right now.
Please, God.
This is God.
Alright guys, we are at the end of the show right now, and we're going to talk about today's meme of the week. So today's meme of the week is this meme that I saw of Pinhead, and it's a very hilarious one. On the top of the meme, you get to see Pinhead at the bottom. Well, he's at the bottom of the picture, so he's at the bottom of the picture, but on top of the meme, it says, when your friends say they don't watch horror movies. And at the bottom caption of Pinhead, it says, we got so much to show you. Oh man, I actually thought that was really funny because it goes back to watching all the Hellraiser movies. Oh man, in their BDSM ways. I mean, it's so crazy watching that movie. I think I might try and watch that movie this week. A couple of things that I am watching at the moment. I am watching the Diablo series on Netflix, and I'm probably butchering that because I don't speak Spanish well. I can't roll my R's. I really suck at rolling my R's. Oh man, if I wanted to pull a Spanish chick and I actually learned Spanish, I would have a terrible time because I can't roll my R's for shit. I would have to stick to things like mañana. Like, I mean, just words that don't have R's in them. And the sad part about it is, like, a lot of words do have R's in them. So it's gonna sound very horrible. But Diablo is what I'm watching right now. That's the series I'm watching on Netflix. Pretty soon I'll probably be talking about that series pretty soon. Also, the movie to kind of catch and watch for this week is Cabin in the Woods. And that's a classic movie that came out, and I believe it came out in like 2011 or 2012. I can't remember right now. But that one is a very good movie because that one is dealing with like some friends who end up going into a cabin and find out that in this cabin that they're being used for a reality TV show or a vicious game. I really can't remember which one it was. But it seemed like it was reality TV in a way. But either way, this movie is really worth watching because of all the aspects about, security and just overall, I want to say fate also. I mean, I know it dealt with like basically just the whole like who's watching you kind of thing, basically, which is basically what I said is security. In this movie also, they have Chris Hemsworth. You get to see Thor before he had the long hair and everything. He's in there doing some bad acting himself. But yeah, definitely check that out. That's on Tubi right now, and it's worth the watch. Other than that, I'm pretty much signing out. I'm gonna check y'all out later. I hope you guys have a good rest of the day, rest of the week, rest of the month, whenever the hell you guys are listening to this. And hopefully I'll catch you guys back another day and listening to me again. Other than that, I am signing out. This is your boy Walterdoom for another episode of Let's Talk About Horror. This is America. Don't let them catch you slipping now. Peace.